When I was about this tall, my mother drove me downtown and stopped in front of a red brick building. She took me inside, walked me down the hallway, and opened a door. And inside, the room was filled with many young children, all sitting on these long, narrow, short tables. And all the children were looking at me, and I was looking at them. And then all of a sudden, I realized my mom's gone. Okay, so a woman sitting in the room found a seat for me at one of those tables. But I needed to go to the bathroom. So I stood up, walked toward the door, and she said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "To the bathroom." And she said, "Well, if you need to go to the bathroom, first you have to raise your hand." So I raised my hand and went to the bathroom. Okay. The last few days of summer, I spent at my great-grandfather's farm with my favorite cousin, Douglas. He was a big farm boy. And I asked Douglas if he would teach me how to whistle like he did to call all the animals on the farm. What he would do is he would pucker his lips and start blowing and make this really loud whistle. So in the bathroom, I thought this was a perfect time to practice whistling. Okay, so I'm in there. I pucker my lips, just like he told me. I start blowing, and I got it. And blam, the bathroom door burst open. This big, bright light was coming through the doorway. A dark silhouette was moving straight forward me. An arm reaches out, grabs my hand, spins me around, and starts spanking me, and says, "Don't you ever do that again." Okay, I was not alarmed one bit by the spanking. Actually, I was smiling from ear to ear because I was so delighted of having just learned how to whistle. You know, learning often happens in the most unexpected places. Okay, now I'm going to fast forward. I tell my students that I have what I call the 3 secrets of the universe. And I never say all 3 at the same time. One of those is learn to love to learn. Because if you learn to love to learn, you will live a life of total and complete wonderment. Now, the key thing here is learning how you love to learn. Now, Laura Brown and I, we met in art school, and we have been creative partners for 48 years. We're both builders and sculptors, and we have spent a lifetime of making, thinking, and learning with our hands. When we were in undergraduate school, we were both inspired by the words of Jacob Bronowski, who's an anthropologist, who said, "The hand is the cutting edge of the mind." To focus on our own personal way of learning, we co-founded Hans House Studio. It's an educational organization that creates projects outside of the traditional classroom through the making of historic objects. We like projects that people don't know about or are almost lost in history. What we discovered is if you remake a historic object as accurately as possible, using the same tools, materials, and techniques as the original makers, you can recover lost history and culture that often you can't find in any other way. Hans House is not a school. It's not a place. It's a way of learning. So where do we begin? We start with an object. And what we'll do is we'll find an image of an object depicted in an artwork. Like in this case, this is an etching of the building of the Louvre in France in 1677. And we'll take an image like that and put it on the wall at school, and we'll say to our students, "How would you like to build this?" Most of the students don't even know what it is, but they'll stand in line to take the class just because they want to build it. And then we tell them our objective is to replicate it as accurately as possible. And then we go to work. And in the process, we uncover the social, political, economic forces that surrounded the original building of the object. So in the end, not only have we replicated the object full scale, and now we know how it works, we also have learned the history of the human-powered crane and how it was used for over 1,000 years to build the great edifices of Europe. Now, Emily, one of our students, she said, I wasn't interested in history. I didn't even like history. She said, I just wanted to be part of a project that was bigger than myself. And she said, they tricked me. Now I love history. Okay, so Discovery Channel came to us and asked us if we would build a fully functioning, full-scale replica of David Bushnell's American Revolutionary War submarine. Now, this is 1775. Now, Hans House, what we do is we research, we dig and dig to find evidence that can authenticate the way these objects were built. So, with the submarine, there was no drawings, there was no physical evidence. The only thing that remained was a 5-page handwritten letter from David Bushnell to Thomas Jefferson describing the submarine. Now, the letter would say things like this: the external shape of the submarine looks like 2 tortoise shells that have been shaped and fitted together with an opening at the top where the head would have been. Now, many historians assumed that the way, using the technique of shipbuilding, that's planks on planks, was the way that this submarine would have been constructed. But in the Bushnell letter, there were no shipbuilding references, so we didn't accept this idea. We thought a less obvious but more likely solution was the Native American technique of dugout canoes. At the time, there was an abundance of large trees in New England. So what we did, we took a log that was 7 feet in diameter, and we split it, and we hollowed it out with axes, just like they would have done. Then we shaped it, and we fitted it together with the opening at the top, just like described in Bushnell's letter. We built our submarine with 50 people in 12 days in the dead of winter. And on the 13th day, we put the submarine on a trailer and took it down to the Duxbury Harbor. I think it's that way. And we dumped it in the ocean, and everything functioned just as we had hoped. So then, we put it on another trailer, drove it down to Annapolis, Maryland, to the United States Naval Academy. And we turned it over to the best submariners in the world so they could test our submarine in their state-of-the-art test tank. What we do is a kind of time travel. We think of these historic objects as time machines for learning. Now, we also learned that in Poland, there was an interest in building a full-scale replica of a 17th century wooden synagogue. Okay, so we also learned that there were over 200 of these synagogues that were built in the 17th and 18th centuries. But every single one of those synagogues were destroyed during the Nazi invasion of Poland in World War II. Now, between the 2 world wars in 1923, professors and students documented those synagogues with photographs and with drawings. And luckily, that documentation survived the war. Otherwise, this history would have been lost forever. Now, Laura and I don't think of ourselves as teachers that impart knowledge to our students, but really rather more like facilitators for learning. What we want to do is create dynamic learning environments where we take others with us on a near mythic journey to recover unknowns. We started with our students building large wooden models that they referenced from the 1923 documentation. We challenged our students to use keen observation and to ask as many questions as possible. And then we encouraged them to follow their own interest and to record any unanswered questions they had in a list. And then we concluded the only way we're going to answer those questions is to go to Poland. So we started creating travel programs to take students to Poland to do field work in existing historic structures that were similar to the destroyed synagogues. Our students were finding credible examples that we could use to, in our future replication projects, to ensure we would have historically accurate details. Now, our students were finding these credible examples. And for example, on one of these days, we were working on doing this field work, and the student, Nick, came running up to me. And he said, Rick, he said, I found the exact detail of the synagogue door that we saw in the 1923 documentation. And he said, I got to walk through the door and look back, and now I know exactly how that structure works. Often, these synagogues were elaborately painted interiors, from the bottom of the wall to the top of the wall, and from the top of the wall to the very top of the ceiling. So we decided we're going to replicate the ceiling painting of the Gevorgis Synagogue at half scale. Now, we knew this was going to be very difficult because all the documentation had been done in black and white photographs. So through our travel programs, we did extensive color research. We spent 5 years researching color and replicating that ceiling painting at half scale and to get it into color. Okay, so also, we built a full-scale replica of the Gevorgis Synagogue bima. The bima is this elaborately carved, six-sided, raised platform that sits right in the center of the synagogue. Respectfully, after 7 years of research and replication of objects, the Poland Museum of the History of Polish Jews had known about our research we were doing in Poland over the years, and they came to us and said they wanted us to replicate full-scale the Gevorgis Synagogue roof structure, the entire ceiling panels, the painting, and the full-scale bima for their new, to-be-built International Museum in Warsaw. So we proposed to use the Hans House method, which we would do over the next 3 years with over 300 professionals and students from around the world. This enormous project would provide us an unlimited amount of opportunities for hands-on learning. Often, our students, they would make discoveries that the scholars and the professionals overlooked or just missed. And on the first day of our classes, I would always ask the students, what are your skill sets? And in this class, you know, again, we're going to be painting this painting that has an abundance of sacred Hebrew text. So the first day I asked, is there anybody in the class who went to Hebrew school? And Ariel raised her hand. And so I said, well, then you're the expert. And I'd like you to take charge of the research of the Hebrew text. And Ariel said, I went to Hebrew school, but I wasn't a very good student. and I said, Ariel, in this class, you're the only one who went to Hebrew school. Therefore, you are the expert. Well, thank goodness, lucky for me, she took that challenge to heart. And she took ownership of that project. And she spent 7 years with us, researching and painting, and I mean painting and painting, every single letter, every single word of that entire ceiling painting. And that all her work had to be approved, get official approval from the Rabbi of Poland. And Rabbi Shudrick came to us, and he spent days scrutinizing every single letter, every single word. And then he came to us and he openly said, Ariel, I think you know more about this history than I do. At Hans House, we say students can make history. Now, at Hans House, we rely on the power of the collective mind. We bring together craftspeople, professionals, and students where everyone works side by side to replicate an object that none of them have ever made before. We set the standards very high. Our goals are almost unachievable. But everybody contributes, and everybody learns. Now imagine yourselves on this next learning adventure. We're currently collaborating with zoos on a new project we call Toys for Elephants. Yes, that's Toys for Elephants. Our students are designing and building objects to enhance the quality of life of elephants in captivity, but not just in the U.S. We've been taking travel programs to Thailand, where students are working in elephant sanctuaries, also making enrichment objects and working in a culture that has a long history of working closely with elephants. Now, learning how to whistle in the school bathroom at 5 years old was a beginning of a lifetime of learning in unexpected places. I invite you to learn to love to learn, and you will live a life of total and complete wonderment. Thank you.